we can share with people after if they want it or if they're not able to join or join late. To everyone who is here, thanks for spending some time with us. I'm excited for Mollie and Al to dive into this. I think before we get started, it'd be helpful to just do some quick intros for all of us, and then we can dive into this topic. But Al, if you want to go first, and then we can just go through.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Happy Monday. My name is Al D. I am a speaker, facilitator, and a podcast host. The podcast I host is called The Edge of Work. But I am passionate about all things talent and leadership. And so I work with companies each day to help them attract and retain top talent, as well as to develop the next generation of leaders inside of their organizations so that they can create cultures where people can thrive. Big fan of Ben and the team. And so really excited to be here and to talk about a topic that I'm super passionate about as well. So thank you, Ben, for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Al.
Awesome. Nice. I'm excited to be on this panel as well. Hi, everyone. I'm Mollie Wasser, Senior University Program Leader at Fidelity Investments. I run our enterprise-wide internship program. So we bring on about 1,100 interns every summer nationally across 10 plus regions. I run what that experience looks like and support our recruiters in hiring for that, and also run all kind of conversion, key form process, communications, all of that fun stuff. Based in Brooklyn, for those of you who are listening in on our prior conversation, but travel up to Boston and our other big offices quite a bit.
Awesome. Thanks, Mollie. And I'm Ben, co-founder and CEO here at Abode. We are a software platform that helps companies engage and retain early career talent, mainly from the time that they get an offer to join as an intern all the way until they come back full-time post-grad. So I promise this won't be a sales pitch, but I do talk about this a lot with our customers and partners. So excited to dig into that. And I think with that, maybe let's jump in. We'll start kind of high level and then get into some more nitty-gritty stuff. But obviously, we're here to talk about converting interns to full-time. And I think the obvious goal is that this isn't just to hand out an offer at the end of the internship program and hope for the best, but to bring these people back as productive and full-time employees post-grad, hopefully for as long as possible. So I think, Mollie, it could be helpful to talk about as you think about that goal, how early in the process of recruiting interns you start planting the seed of like, hey, we want you to come back here full-time, hopefully. How do you get them excited about that, and maybe what are some tactical ways that you actually go about doing that?
Really good question. I would say before we even really plant this with the interns, the first thing we do is and have been working to get better at least at Fidelity, is aligning the internship opportunities to what could be full-time work. So kind of gone are the days of really just bringing on friends and family to give them a fun summer experience. And we really now are looking at ensuring that all the internship roles that we're hiring for are going to or have the opportunity to in some way convert to a full-time opportunity that we would have. So that's probably the first thing I would say. But I would say is in terms of planting seeds with interns, we're doing this as early as during the interview process. We really want interns to feel a sense of an understanding of the community and the camaraderie that we have to offer them at Fidelity. We want to make sure that their internship experience and their interview experience matches what it would be like to be with the company full time. So we're doing that from our conversations with them. They usually have some sort of recruiter screen at the beginning of the process. So we're making sure that our recruiters are really able to speak to, okay, yes, this is a 10-week experience that we want to interview you for and consider you for, but what comes after that, should you do well? And we want you to do well. And here's what we're going to do to help you do well. But then also, what does that opportunity look like? Tactically, I would say recruiter screens are a big part of it. One of the things we added this year that I was excited that we implemented, I think we're going to probably expand, is we're moving out of this hybrid, everyone, well, not even, we're moving out of this like remote work and into some portion of time is spent in office. And so we did open houses in some of our offices this before the summer started to allow interns an opportunity to come in and get office tours, see the space, and really understand what the environment is going to be like that they'll be working in this summer. So that was a big piece of it. But I would also say it's in every communication we send out. We did leverage Abode. It's not a sales pitch, but we do leverage Abode quite a bit and use the platform in order to communicate with interns. Essentially, it was at least every other week, if not weekly, starting in January before they joined us in June. And those communications included things like, career pathing and diversity and inclusion and what remote work looks like and what in-person work looks like at the firm and how we view those things as different and why you're going to get the chance to do both as an intern. So we're really constantly looking for ways to ensure that they're really understanding what the work at Fidelity is even before they step foot on our campus in June.
Are you doing anything where you're, connecting students throughout this entire process with former interns or other early career people, or maybe, Al, have you seen anything with the companies that you work with where they do this really well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're spot on, Ben. I mean, the way that I kind of think about it is almost like the concept of like surround sound, right? In terms of being able to really have kind of engagement as well as knowledge and voice in addition to kind of just the main thing you do, but just all around them. And so I think what it really speaks to, though, is that we talk about and we throw around words like culture and all these types of things, a lot. And the opportunity I think there is that particularly with individuals who are joining the workplace for the first time, or maybe it's, their first or second real work experience, being able to inculcate these messages, these ideas, this understanding and awareness of, hey, this is who we are. This is what you can expect, and here how this is going to benefit you in your career. I think that's really important leading up to, during, and even after that summer experience. And so I think I've seen some of the lead or companies that are being more intentional about this and really thinking about how do we do that both with technology. Again, not a sales pitch, but certainly Abode can certainly help with that. But also in terms of having some alignment around who are the other people that should be involved in disseminating some of these messages, right? In terms of, and what role do the other stakeholders play? I think everyone on here who's involved in the kind of the university recruiting space knows that these early career programs, they're a team sport, not an individual one. And so I think some of the ones that I've seen kind of the most success are the ones who figure out ways to bring people along on the journey with them to kind of support their interns. And certainly the manager will play a role in that, but there certainly are other stakeholders that are involved too. And so I think that the two things that I kind of take away are, how are you finding ways to have that surround sound and keep it consistent so that they feel like they're learning and that you're driving the messages that you want to drive, as well as how are you ensuring that other people are playing a role in supporting this, because certainly you can't do it all alone.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think a lot of this too, we've talked about obviously the things that you can share with them throughout, the entire process that are coming directly, from you or the other people who are involved in the programs. But obviously that 8 to 12 week period where they're with you as interns is really the time to show them, what it would be like to come back and be here full time. And so I guess, Mollie, how do you make them feel like that throughout the internship? How do you make them kind of wake up every morning and understand, oh, this is what it could really be like to be a full-time employee here at Fidelity, and make it exciting for them?
Good question. I think one of the things that we are doing this summer, at least attempting to, and I think doing a decent job at it, is trying to strike the right balance between what are we offering them from a programmatic perspective, what events are we hosting, what opportunities are we giving them to receive a mentor and come to networking events, but also what amount of time are we giving them to dedicate to their team? Because I could do as much, my team and I could do as much as we can in terms of building these awesome networking events and introducing them to different parts of the firm. But if we do too much of that, they are then stepping away from their manager and the work that they're being assigned. So we've been striving to keep a pretty consistent schedule this summer. I would say we've got, for weeks where they're not in office, about one event an hour-long event a week, but weeks with it when they are in office, we're doing really robust in-person programming, whether it be like career fair style, networking events where they get to meet people from different employee resource groups or affinity groups or whatever you call them at your firms. All of you out there on the call, we're doing really casual drop-in, grab breakfast, really making sure they all know they have a friendly face within the talent acquisition and university talent teams who they can go to in their local regions, but also making sure that we're directing them to their managers whenever they have questions for us that are like, you got to, build that relationship within your team, because that's what the real job is going to be like. They're not going to have, kind of this like school style events that we put on for them during the summer. So we really want to make sure that they're spending as much time as possible, really diving into those projects, working with their managers, embedding themselves fully into the teams. And we've been doing that mostly that way, but also kind of piggybacking what Al, you said earlier around bringing stakeholders along. I think a big improvement we made this summer was we've started, it sounds really simple, but sending a newsletter out to managers once a week, just letting managers know what their interns are up to. We've, heard in the past and from other firms that I've been at too, like, hey, my intern didn't come to this meeting because they said they had this intern event. What is that? And there's nothing worse than being an intern program manager and like, well, why didn't the interns tell their managers they had this great event that we were hosting? But the interns might not know that it's like cool to tell their manager or how to best navigate that. So we found this summer keeping stakeholders really aware, and managers as that like main stakeholder group for us, really aware of what the interns have going on, has helped them better kind of help their intern navigate their summer and really understand, okay, when I do join full-time, I might be navigating these different responsibilities if I join an affinity group and want to do these extracurricular things, but also navigating my job. So I feel like the intern program plus their role is a good picture of what a job would look like. You're always navigating different priorities in a corporate environment.
I guess I'm curious because this is always a helpful exercise for us at Abode and everything that we do. Al or Mollie, like, what are some of the things that you guys have tried or seen people try throughout intern programs that haven't worked, that people should maybe stay away from and not do?
So I think Mollie hit on it a little bit, and I think it's sometimes very easy to conflate action or activity and action with progress. And I think the lesson that I'm taking away from it, and Mollie hit on it a little bit, is sometimes less is more. And I think that it's very easy and well-intentioned to want to give them a great experience and to equate that with we need to give them all the things, when in sometimes maybe the best thing that you can do is to figure out what you can actually take away. So the proverbial subtraction or addition by subtraction. And so I think, yeah, throwing the kitchen sink isn't something that can work. And if anything, it actually makes things worse, because it makes the thing that they have, which is time, which is their most scarce resource, even more scarce. And I also think something that I think we've all kind of had to struggle with kind of like navigating is just, it's, the classic, like proverbial, like if you build it, they will come. Right. And I think in reality, there is a lot of intentionality that needs to come into whatever you're deciding to put on, or whatever you're deciding to put out there. Even if it may seem simple or like an easy lift, really being intentional about what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve, and how does this specific thing, fit within the context of that, and being able to weigh that with all the other things that you're doing. And so I that would be the thing that comes up the most, is just, sometimes less can be more. And so, and even if I'm sure we all could probably apply that to our own just work, each and every day, right? If we looked at our to-do list or a calendar and, looked at, we're like, oh, could we get rid of one more thing? Would it actually free us up to be more impactful in other ways? And so, yeah, the two that come up the most would probably be if you build it, they will come, and then throwing the kitchen sink and realizing that in the end, less is actually more.
I would love to add on to what you said about if you build it, they will come, because this is something we've tried to do for the last few years, was like a self-service, kind of expecting the interns to be able to like find the events themselves and like check into things and sign up for things. And we used to put all of our events out on a SharePoint site and say, check SharePoint for your events. And but then we would be shocked that they wouldn't show up. And so we're still trying to figure out the right balance here, to figure out how much to communicate directly to interns. What do we put immediately on their calendar? What do we ask them to opt into? And how do we communicate this to them? It's been a constant struggle. If anyone feels like they're an expert at it, please reach out. But I would say that we've kind of found this. What hasn't worked was full self-service, but then what also hasn't worked was full put it on their calendar, because then you also don't know who to expect to attend. And so we're still working on that. Neither of those things work. So somewhere in the middle has been somewhat successful. But I would say one thing I've learned this summer, maybe more than ever, is this generation's desire to understand what they're walking into, really feel a sense of transparency and clarity, and just setting up saying, hey, this is a networking event, show up, is not going to work, and it hasn't worked for us. I can tell you from experience. And so one thing that I continue to work on is, setting expectations with interns and saying, hey, if you show up, here's what you can expect. Yes, there is food. No, there is not X. You will walk in and there will be these people from these groups here. Here's some questions that help, kickstart your conversations, really making them feel prepared. That's something that's, we've stumbled on a little bit and then have continued to try to improve throughout the summer.
Parker and I, my co-founder, we spent some time up at the campus recruiting forum in Philly, maybe like a month ago now at this point. And one of the things that a lot of people there were talking about was kind of what you just hit on, which is, making certain events required and certain, kind of up to them. How do you sort of differentiate those that, where you're telling them, hey, you have to come to this, versus, hey, this one's, up to you?
Yeah, we're still continuing to strike that balance, because my team oversees the internship program. That's what is the consistent experience for all interns? And then there are a tech intern program and an HR intern program and sub-program managers. All of those program managers stuff is required essentially for the interns to go to. Almost everything that my team does is not required, with the exception of really week one onboarding. So that is why we set up and scheduled week one onboarding directly on interns' calendars. And then the rest of the summer, we've just been trying to do a good job of pushing out comms, reminding them to sign up for things, encouraging attendance. Not saying that's the perfect approach, but what we've kind of gone through is, okay, putting things directly on their calendars that are either highly encouraged or required, like an onboarding meeting or things with their business unit, and then really just trying to encourage and engage them as much as we can with the things that, hey, if you're in your best interest to come to this, you might get something out of it, and go from there.
Awesome. I want to go back to something that both of you guys have kind of lightly touched on already, which is managers and other stakeholders who are involved in the programs. Obviously, I think an intern's experience is pretty heavily weighted by the experience they have directly with the people they work with, and obviously a lot of those are these managers and other people who aren't directly on your teams. I know you mentioned the newsletter and things like that. How do you kind of empower the managers to give all your interns an amazing experience, and maybe how do you set expectations with them of what it is that I guess if you guys expect of them if they're going to be managing interns? Al or Mollie, whoever wants to take that.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is just reminding them that just to think back and reflect upon what their first experience was like when they joined the workforce for the first time. Forget this company, but just the workforce for the first time, and just getting them to perspective take and to hopefully exhibit that empathy for what it's like to be in the workplace for the first time is a really good grounding mechanism to help them understand just what altitude level that they might need to get into, and also what, as a result of working with someone or managing someone who is coming from that background, what they have to offer as a result of that perspective, right? And so I think that's one of the really first things. And I think more tactically, what that often amounts to is that context is really important, right? And so I think Mollie even was suggesting it earlier. So it's not just saying, hey, there's this networking event, but here's why it's really important and valuable for you to attend this, right? Because if you've never understood, what element, how relationships really matter in the workplace, or if you don't really understand how social capital works, how do you know that you should be going to something like this? And so I think it's really grounding managers and helping them, again, with that perspective taking about really meeting people where they are and also figuring out how you can put them in positions to succeed. I think the other thing is reminding them that it is an investment, right? In terms of, particularly if you are looking for these folks to come on full time, this is one leg of that investment where you are going to be kind of dedicated in putting in some of your own investment into making sure that this person can be successful. But with any investment, there's always expected potential for ROI, right? And so it's just reminding them that yes, investment is going to come in the form probably of taking time, but all good investments do require you to invest in them before they pay off for the longer term. And so I think those are the two big things. And then the last thing is just as you don't need to go it alone, neither does the manager, right? And yes, they are responsible and play a big role, but oftentimes as a manager, one of the best things that you can do is to loop in the people that in the organization that could be helpful to your intern as well. Whether it's to make them more effective at their job, whether it's to help the intern feel more connected to the organization, or just to make sure that they know that they're welcomed and supported here. And so I think that's the other thing in terms of setting expectations around this is that, hey, you play a really important role, but it doesn't all need to be on you, and really empowering them to take some agency in terms of how they choose to invest in that intern, even if it doesn't always mean that they have to be the one to do it.
I would take what Al said, I would say ditto, and then I would add on a little tactical piece of this, which we do manager prep calls. So I would say, as important as it is to keep interns warm and make sure that they understand what they're walking into and make them feel prepared, it's equally as important to prepare the managers leading up to the summer. We do prep calls every summer. We did them again this year, and we cover basically everything Al just said. We cover, why they are playing such a huge role in this intern's experience. One thing that I would add to that, though, is we added this year was we shared with the managers what's in it for them. We thought that, managers dedicate, whether they are first-time managers or someone who's managed full-time associates at the company for a long time, they dedicate a lot of the summer, 10 whole weeks, at least at Fidelity, to really making sure this intern has a good experience. And that can be challenging, right? Like, this could be the intern's first corporate experience. It could be their first experience at a big company, at a small company, at a company in whatever industry you're in. And so we want to make sure that the managers know, like, hey, even if this intern doesn't directly convert to your team and therefore help your bottom line, here's what you can get out of it. And that can be anything from, you get leadership exposure because your intern does great work and interns are super visible, or hey, you're a first-time manager, so like you get to test out being a manager in maybe a lower stakes environment because they're an intern with an end date in sight. So that's something that we added this year that I think has helped us really get that buy-in from the managers to provide that really strong experience.
Awesome. So we've covered kind of, how to warm interns up to the idea of coming back full time as early as kind of the first recruiter screen. We've talked about the program itself. I think a big topic that we hear a lot, obviously, is, okay, it's been a great program. You're handing out, return offers, and now you've got another year until they come back, right? And I think a lot of employers are seeing, renegs. We always talk about that, but I think a lot of employers are seeing it, in this kind of conversion period. So I guess the first question, Mollie, is kind of, why do you think this is happening? What are people doing wrong or maybe right, but why are they seeing renegs after the program, and even more so than they are leading up to it?
Yeah, it's such a hard question because every reneg comes along with like a very specific personal answer that you get from the student or from the person. At least in terms of like thematically, what I think I've seen is interns in the last couple of years, especially post 2020, are really nervous about career stability, and a lot of times will take the first offer they're given. They will, they'll get an offer that maybe isn't exactly aligned to the department they were hoping to work for, or is leveraging some of the skill sets they wanted to use, but maybe not all of them. And they will take it, and then they'll get something better, and or more aligned to them, like more, aligned to the skills they want to use, more aligned to the industry that they want to be in. And they will say, so sorry, never mind. So that's some of what I've been seeing. I also think location has a big part to play in it. We saw some amount of folks who interned for us in a year that was like fully remote, and then when they got an offer to come back, and now that we've moved into a hybrid work environment where you do have some required time in office, that might not align to their needs and their locations. So some of that definitely has come into play, at least for us, and likely for other companies who are in a similar spot. So that's really what I've been seeing in terms of the why. It's highly challenging, because what you can change to maybe fix some of those will then break something for someone else that it totally worked for. But that's at least some of what I've been seeing in terms of trends for us.
Yeah, I think, from the intern perspective too, like a lot of the value of an internship is to also figure out what you don't want to do. So in some cases, it can be as much as we want these to be pipelines of talent that all come back, it can also be a positive, right? That people have figured out that they want to go do something else. Sort of a side question. Have either of you seen like pressure from universities and career centers to the students to kind of take these offers immediately, and maybe that's part of why the renegs are happening?
I will see the opposite sometimes. I feel like the schools are trying to push interns to not accept offers right away, because some of the schools have like their own offer deadline that then they want employers to follow, which sometimes we don't because we have our own processes and our own policies. But sometimes a career services center could like push an intern or a student to accept something that might be like, a bigger company than maybe the intern's actually looking for a small startup, and they want to be somewhere small, but the school is like, oh, it's really good, and if you go to this big stable company, I think career services typically has students' best interest in mind, but you never know.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I mean, I think, from my experience, at least, career services doesn't love to be in a position where if a renege like happens, where they have to kind of apologize for it, right? I mean, they would prefer not to have that happen. And so my hunch would be that they would they would much rather have a student make a decision that is beneficial to not putting the university in that kind of position, right? And so if it meant that it meant passing on an offer versus reneging because it wasn't sure, they would probably sleep a little bit better at night in the bigger picture. But I mean, it could be I don't know if you're seeing anything on your end. The only other thing I was going to add to the question you had before about why is this happening, it's interesting. I was doing some research over the weekend, and I was getting ready for an upcoming podcast episode I'm going to record on just kind of like the history of careers. And I found the press release for when LinkedIn announced that they were creating a job board back in 2005. And it was kind of crazy because it made me reflect and think like, wow, like how did people find like jobs back in the day, quote unquote, back in the day? I mean, it's interesting just to see how much culture and technology has played a role in facilitating this. And I think about it in terms of we have more choice than ever before in many ways, and then we have more accessibility in many ways. I think I remember even my first job was joined the workforce in 2010. It really was okay. What is campus recruiting, or is my university recruiting career center posting versus today? We could open our phone and with one click get 10 potential postings that are right there. And so I think there is just an element of just our culture and society and technology has evolved where opportunities in many ways, particularly for those who have skills and degrees, like they're just more abundant than ever before. And there's an element of that we just can't change, and it is what it is. But it did make me reflect for a little bit of like, wow, like, how did they do campus recruiting in the 1980s and 1990s? I mean, I know they did it, but it just was a fun kind of reflection down memory lane of just how far we've come over the past couple decades.
It was just career fairs then.
Yes, exactly. And
yeah, it is crazy. And obviously in 2005, I was 8, so I don't have a whole lot to say. One of the things that we believe pretty deeply, and I think we've seen to be true, is that community and just, making connections with the people that you work with is such a big driver of enjoying what you do, whatever the company is. Obviously, you can facilitate that pretty heavily throughout the program itself, but when everyone goes back to campus and they're all spread out across the country or wherever they are, what are some ways that you guys have done a good job, Mollie, of keeping people engaged and connected with each other throughout that kind of period from post internship and until they come back full time?
Yeah, good question. So our process to convert, which I don't necessarily recommend. I think giving an offer out as they are leaving is always best practice. But our process does extend a little bit into the fall, given some of our interns are not converting directly to the business unit. They interned for. So we're, I guess, lucky and unlucky that some of our communication with them and light interview processes with them do continue after they leave. But once we do, get them that offer or want to keep them warm until we can get them an offer, one of the things we do actually while they're here, once they leave the company, they lose access to their email address, they lose access to everything. So we've told them, we tell them during onboarding, and we remind them all the time to connect on LinkedIn with the people that they're networking with so that they can retain those conversations, those connections that they've made. And we've really found that our associates do a really good job of staying connected with the interns. So that's something that's worked out for us. But I would say in more of like a structured programmatic way, we do kick off, keep warm communications quite quickly after the summer. So right now we're building a lot of that out to prepare for the summer. Or to prepare for post summer, making sure that we are building those communities. So our plan for this year, I know Ben says not sales, but I'll do the sales pitch for them. We are going to use Abode into the fall. So for those who aren't familiar with the platform, you're able to load all your programmatic hires in. You can distribute them up into different cohorts. So we like to use a regional cohort structure. That way interns or incoming full-time hires are connected to those who they'll be seeing in person. So we will build that out for them. It's also, we found a really good way to allow the interns to connect with each other, to find roommates or retain those connections that way. And then I think I mentioned earlier that we tested out open houses leading up to the incoming intern program. We'll likely do similar things again. That way we can, continue to bring them on site, make sure they're feeling engaged, cheering from us. And honestly, swag and gifts always helps. If we're sending them stuff, they love all the stuff. We added a lot more free stuff this summer and it still doesn't seem to be enough. So as much as you could do to, make them feel like, hey, we remember you. We know it's a really long time between August and the following summer. And we hope you didn't forget, we didn't forget. That will always help. But really encouraging them to stay connected with each other has been something that's really helpful. Because if their friends returning, they're not going to want to disappoint their friend either. So that's been good to build too.
Yeah, Ben, I'll just jump in and add just a couple quick things. So I work with a lot of MBA programs in companies that recruit MBAs, and a big thing for a lot of those individuals, particularly from full-time programs, is they're thinking very much about their professional network. And so I've seen some companies do some really intentional things around after they've signed on the dotted line, really trying to help connect those candidates and now hopefully full-time employees with other people, either who are alum of that program who also work at the company, or geographically, like I think Mollie did, of okay, you're going to be in Atlanta, and so we're going to try to connect you with a handful of other folks who are either going to the Atlanta office or recently did in the last couple of years and stuff like that. And so just, trying to, again, bring that surround sound into the picture and to really welcoming them and reminding them that they are, that you're excited to have them and that you're trying to set them up for success in ways that are intentional and hopefully, lightweight. And so I've definitely seen, a lot of that, as well as certainly if you are a program that is recruiting talent from across multiple campuses or universities or things like that. I think there's obviously opportunities to kind of connect candidates like together as well through technology and other types of stuff. And so, yeah, anything you can do to really kind of promote that sense of community, as well as reminding them of the fact that, yeah, like at the end of the day, like organizations are just a bunch of people working towards shared goals, and you're there to try to welcome them in by and setting them up for success, because these are people that once they show up on day one, they already have potentially a built-in set of people that they can go to ask questions or for help, or just to have a friendly face.
Yeah, I guess similar question maybe to earlier, but how do you kind of empower the managers and the other stakeholders, or even incentivize them to kind of proactively keep in touch with their interns from this summer too? Because I think, it's one thing to make them super engaged throughout the program and they're great, and then kind of, they leave and maybe it's a little bit of out of sight, out of mind type of thing. How do you keep them involved in this process?
It's a good question. It's a difficult answer. So my prior role at Fidelity, I used to run and also run the recruiting and the program management for some of our investment populations. So when you say MBAs, like those sorts of roles, investment research professionals. And so it was a much smaller program. It was, no more than 50 or so interns who almost all would convert to full time because it was, a big conversion strategy. And those managers were super invested in the success and the mitigation of reneges, which was really lucky. And so we would work with them, and those managers would have monthly reminders on their calendars to reach out to those incoming full-time associates. I would say it was highly impactful. We had very few reneges in that space. And the ones that came through were typically family emergencies or like some really extenuating circumstances that we could have done nothing to prevent. So I would say if you, all of you out there on the call are in positions where you kind of have a smaller circle of control over the managers or the stakeholders that you work with, I'd highly encourage you to influence folks to do something like that. The interns will, pressure is the wrong word, but feel the most inclined to respond and stay in touch with not university talent and not talent acquisition, right? Like they know, they're smart, and they know that our role is filling roles and filling jobs and ensuring that the company is well staffed. But if they have folks who are reaching out to them who are, we know that we are invested in their success and we really care about them, but they might not totally see that. But I think they'll feel that if a manager or someone who's directly in the department that they're going to go work for really cares about them returning and their sick and, how their semester is going, and hey, how was your, winter holiday break? I think that goes a really long way. Still working on perfecting that at the scale of program that I'm helping manage now, but at least from a small program perspective, that was always really, really successful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Okay, I think one more, maybe it's a two-part question, and then we'll leave some time if anyone on the call has anything. But I think this is something that a lot of people are probably thinking about. What are kind of the data points that are important to be tracking here as it relates to, continuing to kind of get buy-in from your leadership to prove that your program is worthwhile? Maybe what are the key things that you're thinking about at Fidelity or Al that you're seeing people think about in their programs that help them kind of make the best argument there and prove that you really are building a strong, early talent pipeline through your internship program?
Good question. Conversion's number one. If you already have a solid program where your conversion numbers have been pretty high, which I think I saw, it might have been a NASTAT industry average last year was like 50, in the 50%, I want to say, of converting interns to full-time. That's great, a great step. But what I would say is if you could work with anyone on your broader recruiting team to pull something around like cost per hire for non-intern hiring and show how expensive it is to hire someone into a more experienced job versus hiring someone for a 10-week intern program, keeping them engaged and in touch with you, and then converting them to full-time, and kind of the cost savings that does come along with that. Home growing talent is a cost savings exercise. And I think leadership and finance is really invested in that, and finding ways to build our own talent. At least that's what's really important at a company like Fidelity, is how are we building people that, you know, are homegrown, so to say, and that's what interns really are. So that would be a good stat to pull. But you know, I'm not sure, Al, if you have anything to add from what you're seeing in other companies too.
No, I mean, I think both of those are really, really good examples. I mean, and I think you can apply the cost and ROI to a number, or the cost like comparison to a number of other different, I guess, levers, like if you will, in terms of you know, other types of programs that you have, maybe not university recruiting, but other types of programs you have for recruiting, and showing just the delta between, you know, particularly at this level, you know, what the ROI is versus some of the other things you have. Certainly also just, if you are recruiting talent in demand roles, or roles in particular where there is a pretty tight labor market, just really also showing the potential cost of inaction or not doing that, right? And what that would look like, or you know, being able to show just, you know, in some of those cases, you know, just how hard it is to, generally speaking, recruit for those specific roles. I mean, I'm thinking about software engineering and some of those other types of things. I think, you know, being able to show those comparisons and just how yours kind of stacks up to that, I think can be really, really helpful and really valuable to kind of paint, you know, paint the picture, if you will.
I would add on to that. You reminded me of it at the tail end of what you said there. Pulling in like the fact that other top companies, if you're talking software engineers as an example, all these big companies have intern programs where they are converting interns to full-time, and that's their main strategy. So by not having an intern program, you are missing out on talent who is getting plucked off early on. I will say, especially in wanting to greater diversify your workforce, interns are like one of the top ways of doing that. Building that pipeline early, getting in with students, you know, early on in school when they haven't quite yet had the opportunity to, you know, whether if they're underrepresented minority in school, and you meet them really early on, you have an opportunity to help guide and develop these students early on, and really make sure that you're bringing in a diverse workforce too. So I would also add that.
Awesome. Well, hopefully this has been super helpful. I think this has been great. Anything that I didn't ask that you guys think is important, as it just relates to any part of the topic we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes? And if not, if there's anyone that has questions too, we'd be happy to answer those as well.
Not in particular. I was looking through the questions that, you know, you had sent over, some of the topics that we might be discussing today. I think most of it we covered. You know, it sounds really, really silly, but making sure that I don't know if we totally touched on this earlier, making sure that the internship role is a good depiction of what the full-time role is really important. I think sometimes, at least managers that I've worked with have been like, what's the coolest project I could give my intern this summer? And it's like, will they get the coolest project in the entry-level job? So I think really making sure that what they're doing is really similar to what they would be doing full-time. So, you know, they don't feel surprised by what they'd be walking into is the last thing I would add there.
Awesome. Looks like we have one question here. Says, can you speak about any mentorship or DEI programs you've used or seen that contribute to conversion?
Totally. This was again in my prior role, but we had at Fidelity some diversity early career programming. So sophomores, freshmen, really introducing them early on to the company and helping them understand what makes Fidelity a good place to work, but also what resources we have to help them as an individual develop. And when we're talking diversity and inclusion programming in particular, I would say you should always think about those things with a lens of what are you giving the student. It's really easy to be like, well, you know, we're trying to make our workforce more diverse, and so therefore we need X, Y, and Z groups of people to come join the company. I totally understand that, and that is part of the role that we all have. But it's really important to make it beneficial to the student. Otherwise, it comes off a little bit, just like very corporate greed vibes. So what I would say there is really learn like development focused programs were really successful. I helped launch one that was for freshmen, helping them understand, different roles in investment research, how to pitch a stock, like really give them the resources they need to then be a successful, whether it be an investment banker at another company or a research associate at somewhere like Fidelity in asset management. That's something that's really good. And also giving them skills to walk away with. So like help them do a resume review where you help review their resume for them so they walk away with a strong resume, whether it be to apply to your own company or others. That's something that they really can then have as a tangible thing to walk away with. So that's been really good. We also though know that like every intern, every person that comes to work for the company could be part of any group. So we've really enhanced our program this summer for all interns, where we're doing inclusion programming. All interns can attend, learn about intersectionality, allyship, mental health in the workplace. And we also have an opportunity for all interns to sign up and receive a mentor from an affinity group, or what we call our employee resource group. So that's what we've done for all interns. But that's also what I would say about like early ID programming too. Hope that helps.
Yeah, I was just going to add, so I used to work at Salesforce, and I didn't work in university recruiting, but I partnered with them quite a bit, and they did a really good job of the broader Future First program was really aligned with all of the ERGs, and they would host different, it was almost the ERGs would host different events, but also be really involved just in terms of making themselves aware and available to the interns, and just in terms of welcoming them, but also providing that they were able there to help and serve as resources and connect people, or just, be a friendly face that someone could relate to. And so that was always something that was really, really popular. And then this is more again at the graduate level, but I've seen a lot of companies have, if they were involved in DEI efforts with programs like Forte Foundation and Consortium, Management Leadership for Tomorrow, a lot of times what I would see them do is try to almost like sometimes it was more ad hoc and more like grassroots, but the individuals who were members or alum of those programs inside of organizations would almost band together to try to welcome the interns who also were, part of those organizations and things like that. And it's almost like you have like a mini alum community within the company of that as a means to kind of foster that inclusion as well as support for those people. And so I thought those were always really interesting and helpful as well.
Awesome. Looks like we have another question that says, what is a good cadence for following up with interns post-internship?
Good question. Assuming we're talking about interns who have already gotten a full-time offer to return, like they're not still in the interview process or anything, I would say we tried to do at least once a month. And I think we could have afforded to do more, and probably will do a little bit more frequent. But I'd also say it depends on the time of year. So like going into this fall, we're likely looking at about once a month, but then once we hit January and they're about 5 months out, and we maybe have some onboarding tasks for them to do or important pre-start reminders to send out, we are likely looking at about twice a month, and then hit April and it's probably once a week. But I would say when thinking cadence and communications to incoming interns or those who are converting, and it's something I've struggled with too, is like working on striking a good balance between something that I can't think of a better word than fluffy. It's not fluffy. It's like culture or a D&I article or something about the company's culture, with hey, here's a tangible thing that's specific to your role or your onboarding or your whatever, for them to do, so that they're not, just glazing over all of the things that are just feeling like culture, and then they're all of a sudden missing the important to-dos once it gets a little bit closer. So that's something that I know I'm looking at and working on, is how do we make sure that maybe it's every other, maybe like they get something that's an interesting article about a new product Fidelity launched, and then they're also getting a hey, we have this event for you to attend before you start with us this summer. Hope you can make it. So that would be what I would add in addition to the cadence.
I guess I'll ask like a follow-up question to that, which is how does the content that you're sharing differ between people who are like net new coming into the company, either as an intern or new grad, versus someone who's spent, 10 weeks full time with you and has much deeper knowledge of the business, or does it change?
Yeah, I would say like timing is what changes the most. Like we start earlier with those who are conversions because we have the list and we know who they are sooner. But it's a lot of times it'll focus for those net new that are coming in, it'll focus more on, hey, here's overview of the company, here's some high level things to understand. Whereas for those converting, we're not going to send them the same things we sent them last year. They don't need the same welcome video that my team recorded in December. So it's likely probably more focused on those, hey, here's an opportunity for you to network, or here's some to-dos and onboarding tasks. And those who are net new are getting a little bit more of the like understanding the firm articles. But we still do some balance of that because it's possible that interns missed it the first time, or that something has changed in the organization that we want to share with them. So it's a balance of both, but I'd say it's mostly timing, and then some content is different.
Awesome. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So Mollie and Al, thank you very much for joining us and doing this. This was great. Hope everyone found this to be valuable as well. We will follow up with everyone who joined or wasn't able to join with a recording of this. And if there's any additional questions, feel free to email me. My email is just ben@abodehr.com, or find me on LinkedIn. But yeah, thanks everyone for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.